The birth of a witch. It was nearly evening by the time Frex had worked up the courage to enter the ramshackle hamlet of Rush Margins. He was in a deep sweat. He hit his heels to the ground and pumped his clenched fists and called out in a hoarse, carrying tone, "Hist, O ye of small confidence, gather while ye may, for temptation is abroad, to try ye sorely." The words were archaic, even ridiculous, but they worked. Here came the sullen fishermen, dragging their empty nets up from the dock. Here came the subsistence farmers, whose hardscrabble plots had borne little during this dry year. Before he had even begun, they all looked guilty as sin. They followed him to the rickety steps of the canoe repair house. Frex knew that everyone expected this evil clock to arrive at any instant. Gossip was as contagious as the plague. He yelled at them for their thirsty anticipation. Ye are dull as toddlers reaching their hands to touch the pretty embers. Ye are as if spawn of dragon womb, ready to suck on teats of fire. These were time-worn scriptural imprecations, and they fell a little flat tonight. He was tired and not at his best. "Brother Frexbar," said Fee, the mayor of Rush Margins, "could you perhaps tone down your harangue until we get a chance to see what fresh new form temptation might take?" "You have no mettle to resist new forms," said Frex, spitting. Haven't you been our able teacher these several years?" said Fee. "We've hardly had such a good chance to prove ourselves against sin. We're looking forward to the spiritual test of it all." The fishermen laughed and jeered, and Frex intensified his glower. But at the sound of unfamiliar wheels in the stony ruts of the road, they all turned their heads and fell silent. He had lost their attention before he had gotten started. The clock was being drawn by 4 horses and escorted by the dwarf and his cohort of young thugs. Its broad roof was crowned by the dragon. But what a beast! It looked poised as if ready to spring, as if indeed invested with life. The skin of the house was decorated in carnival colors, burnished with gold leaves. The fishermen gaped as it drew near. Before the dwarf could announce the time of the performance, before the crowd of youths could draw out their clubs, Frex leaped on the lower step of the thing, a fold-down stage on hinges. "Why is this thing called a clock? The only clock face it has is flat, dull, and lost in all that distracting detail. Furthermore, the hands don't move. Look, see for yourselves. They're painted to remain at 1 minute before midnight. All you'll see here is mechanics, my friends. I know this for a fact. You'll see mechanical cornfields growing, moons waxing and waning, a volcano to spew a soft red cloth done up with black and red sequins. With all this tick-tocky business, why not have a pair of circulating arms on the clock face? Why not? I ask you. I'm asking you. Yes, you, Garnet, and you, Stoy, and you, Peripa. Why no real clock here?" They were not listening, Garnet and Stoy and Peripa, nor were the others. They were too busy staring in anticipation. The answer, of course, is that the clock isn't meant to measure earthly time, but the time of the soul, redemption, and condemnation time. For the soul, each instant is always a minute short of judgment. 1 minute short of judgment, my friends. If you died in the next 60 seconds, would you want to spend eternity in the suffocating depths reserved for idolaters? Awful lot of noise in the neighborhood tonight, said someone in the shadows, and the spectators laughed. Above Frex, he whirled to see. From a little door had emerged a small, yapping puppet dog, its hair dark and as tightly curled as Frex's own. The dog bounced on a spring, and the pitch of its chatter was annoyingly high. The laughter grew. Evening fell harder, and it was less easy for Frex to tell who was laughing, who now was shouting for him to move aside so they could see. He wouldn't move, so he was bundled unceremoniously from his perch. The dwarf gave a poetic welcome. All our lives are activity without meaning. We burrow rat-like into life, and we squirm rat-like through it, and rat-like we are flung into our graves at the end. Now and then, why shouldn't we hear a voice of prophecy, or see a miracle play? Beneath the apparent sham and dignity of our rat-like lives, a humble pattern and meaning still applies. Come nearer, my good people, and watch what a little extra knowledge augurs for your life. The time dragon sees before and beyond and within the truth of your sore span for years here. Look at what it shows you. The crowd pushed forward. The moon had risen, its light like the eye of an angry, vengeful god. Give over, let me go, Frex called. It was worse than he had thought. He had never been manhandled by his own congregation. The clock unfolded a story about a publicly pious man with lamb's wool beard and dark, curly locks, who preached simplicity, poverty, and generosity while keeping a hidden coffer of gold and emeralds in the double-hinged bosom of a weak-chinned daughter of blue blood society. The scoundrel was run through with a long iron stake in a most indelicate way, and served up to his hungry flock of roast flank of minister. This panders to your basest instincts, Frex yelled, his arms folded and his face magenta with fury. But now that darkness was almost total, someone came up from behind him to silence him. An arm encircled his neck. He twisted to see which damned parishioner took such liberties. But all the faces were cloaked by hoods. He was kneed in the groin and doubled over, his face in the dirt. A foot kicked him square between the buttocks and his bowels released. The rest of the crowd, however, was not watching. They were howling with mirth at some other entertainment put on by the clock dragon. A sympathetic woman in a widow's shawl grabbed his arm and led him away. He was too fouled, too much in pain, to straighten up and see who it was. I'll put you down in the root cellar. I will under a burlap, crooned the good wife, for they'll be after you tonight with pitchforks the way that thing is behaving itself. They'll look for you in your lodge, but they won't look in my keeping room. Melina, he croaked, they'll find her. She'll be seen to, said his neighbor. We women can manage that much, I guess. In the minister's lodge, Melina struggled with the consciousness as a pair of midwives went in and out of focus before her. One was a fishwife, the other a palsied crone. They took turns feeling her forehead, peering between her legs, and stealing glances at the few beautiful trinkets and treasures Melina had managed to bring here from Colwyn grounds. "You chew that paste of pin-lobble leaves, ducky. You do that. You'll be unconscious before you know it," said the fishwife. "You'll relax out, will pop the little sweetheart, and all will be well in the morning. Though thought you would smell of rosewater and fairy dew, but you stink like the rest of us. Shoo on, my ducky, shoo on." At the sound of a knock, the crone looked up guiltily from the chest she was kneeling before and rummaging through. She let the lid close with a bang and affected a position of prayer, eyes closed. "Enter," she called. A maiden with tender skin and high color came in. "Oh, I hoped someone would be here," she said. "How is she?" "Nearly out, and so is the babe," answered the fishwife. "An hour more, I reckon." "Well, I'm told to warn you, the men are drunk and on the prowl. They've been riled up by that dragon of the magic clock, you know, and are looking for Frex to kill him. The clock said to. They'll likely stagger out here. We'd better get the wife safely away. Can she be moved?" "No, I cannot be moved," thought Melina. "And if the peasants find Frex, tell them to kill him good and hard for me, for I never knew a pain so extraordinary that it made me see the blood behind my own eyes. Kill him for doing this to me." At this thought, she smiled in a moment of relief and passed out. "Let's leave her here and run for it," said the maiden. "The clock said to kill her too, and the little dragon she's going to give birth to. I don't want to get caught." "We've got our own reputations to uphold," said the fishwife. "We can't abandon the fancy lady thing in mid-delivery. I don't care what any clock says." The crone, her head back in the chest, said, "Anyone for some real lace from Gillikin?" "There's a hay cart in the lower field, but let's do it now," said the fishwife. "Come, help me fetch it, you old mother hag. Get your face out of the linens and come dampen this pretty pink brow. Right-o, now we go." A few minutes later, the crone, the wife, and the maiden were trundling the hay cart along a rarely used track, through the spindles and bracken of the autumn woods. The wind had picked up. It whistled over the treeless foreheads of the cloth hills. Melina sprawled in blankets, heaved and moaned in unconscious pain. They heard a drunken mob pass with pitchforks and torches, and the women stood silent and terrified, listening to the slurred curses. Then they pressed on with greater urgency until they came upon a foggy copse, the edge of the graveyard for unconsecrated corpses. Within it they saw the blurred outlines of the clock. It had been left there for safekeeping by the dwarf. No fool he. He could guess this particular corner of the world was the last place jumpy villagers would seek tonight. The dwarf and his boykins were drinking in the tavern too, said the maiden breathlessly. There's no one here to stop us. The crone said, So you've been peering in the tavern windows at the men, you slut. She pushed upon the door in the back of the clock. She found a crawl space. Pendulums hung ominously in the gloom. Huge toothed wheels looked primed to slice any trespasser into sausage rounds. Come on, drag her in, said the crone. The night of torches and fog gave way at dawn to broad bluffs of thunder cloud, dancing skeletons of lightning. Glimpses of blue sky appeared briefly, though sometimes it rained so hard that it seemed more like mud drops falling than water. The midwives, crawling on hands and knees out of the back of the clock wagon, had their little discharge at last. They protected the infant from the dripping gutter. "Look, a rainbow," said the senior, bobbing her head. A sickly scarf of colored light hung in the sky. What they saw, rubbing the caul and blood of the skin, was it just a trick of the light? After all, following the storm, the grass did seem to throb with its own color. The roses zinged and hovered with crazy glory in their stems. But even with these effects of light and atmosphere, the midwives couldn't deny what they saw. Beneath the spit of the mother's fluid, the infant glistened a scandalous shade of pale emerald. There was no wail, no bark of newborn outrage. The child opened its mouth, breathed, and then kept its own counsel. "Whine, you fiend," said the crone. "It's your first job." The baby shirked its obligations. "Another willful boy," said the fishwife, sighing. "Shall we kill it?" "Don't be so nasty to it," said the crone. "It's a girl." "Huh," said the bleary-eyed maiden. "Look again. There's the weather vane." For a minute they were in a disagreement even with the child naked before them. Only after a second and third rub was it clear that the child was indeed feminine. Perhaps in labor some bits of organic effluvia had become caught and quickly dried in the cloven place. Once toweled, she was observed to be prettily formed, with a long, elegant head, 4 arms nicely turned out, clever pinching little buttocks, cunning fingers with scratchy little nails, and an undeniably green cast to the skin. There was a salmon blush in the cheeks and belly, a beige effect around the clenched eyelids, a tawny stripe on the scalp showing the pattern of eventual hair, but the primary effect was vegetable. "Look what we get for our troubles," said the maiden. "A little green pat of butter. Why wouldn't we kill it? You know what people will say." "I think it's rotten," said the fishwife, and checked for the root of a tail, counted fingers and toes. "It smells like dung." "That is dung you're smelling, you idiot. You're squatting in a cow patty pie." "It's sick, it's feeble, that's why the color. Lose it in the puddle, drown the thing, she'll never know. She'll be out for hours in her ladylike faints." They giggled. They cradled the infant in the crook of their arms, passing it around to test it for weight and balance. To kill it was the kindest course of action. The question was how. Then the child yawned, and the fishwife absent-mindedly gave it a finger to nurse on, and the child bit the finger off at the second knuckle. It almost choked on the gush of blood. The digit dropped out of its mouth into the mud like a bobbin. The woman catapulted into action. The fishwife lunged to strangle the girl, and the crone and the maiden flared up in defense. The finger was dug out of the mire and shoved in an apron pocket, possibly to sew back onto the hand that had lost it. "It's a cock. She just realized she didn't have one," screeched the maiden, and fell on the ground laughing. "Oh, beware the stupid boy first tries to please himself with her. She'll snip this young sprout off for a souvenir." The midwives crawled back into the clock and dropped the thing at its mother's breast, afraid to consider mercy murder for fear of what else the baby might bite. "Maybe she'll shop the tit next. That'll bring her drowsy frailness around quick enough." The crone chuckled. thought what a child that sips blood even before its first suck of mother's milk. They left a pipkin of water nearby, and under cover of the next squall, they went squelching away to find their sons and husbands and brothers, and berate and beat them if they were available, or bury them if not. In the shadows, the infant stared overhead at the oiled and regular teeth of time's clock.